Welcome to I'm Sure They're Doing Their Best with Paul Baylor and Drew Ferguel, your weekly source of tech talk, tips, and terrible ideas.
Drew.
Hi, Paul.
How you doing?
Boy, howdy. I am a tired boy.
Lots of traveling this week?
Yeah. This was a travel week for me. I had to fly this time, which, we can go into a little bit later. I mean, I feel like that could be a whole podcast into itself. But for those people that know me even a little bit, know that I'm not the best flyer in the world. And this week I was traveling for work. I had some training to attend off-site. The interesting thing here is that the distance was definitely drivable. Unfortunately, I had driven to this location once maybe a little over a month ago. And I had every intention of driving again this time, but I also took a personal trip by car to the same rough geographic area. It was the same week I went on vacation and we missed a week.
Okay.
So I just felt like I really didn't want to be in the car again for 7 hours.
I understand. Yeah.
So I nutted up, as they say, and I decided that I was going to fly. And, I have my routine, which, we can get into here a little bit later, but I definitely have my routine for coping with air travel. And I will say that 50% of the flights I were on were good flights. The flight home last night, which was a later flight on time, no complaints. I don't really have any horrible travel stories. I mean, flight delays are flight delays. I'm of the mind that I'd much rather have a plane that works and gets me home later than a plane that, doesn't work and doesn't get me home later.
Exactly. Right.
I would love to maintain my consecutive streak of takeoff and landings. So, yeah. But the flight back last night was very, very bumpy. And I had rules don't apply to me guys sitting next to me who
okay.
Yeah, constantly having to be told to put the tray table up, was basically on his phone as we were taking off. I thought for sure the stewardess was going to turn the plane around. This guy was a complete scumbag. Yeah, so all makes for exciting times on closed metal cylinders traveling way too fast and way too high.
Oh, I'm glad you're back safe and sound.
Yeah, thank you. What's going on with you, buddy?
Just, the grind of adulting.
Yeah, you sound a little down. What's going on?
Oh no, it's fine. I'm just this week's been the week's been long. I'm looking forward to recording this podcast and then going to bed.
So, funny story. I don't remember a lot from last night. So, all right. Well, let's just dive in. So,
okay.
For me, at some point, and I'm not going to get into the reasons why, or else we'd have to add a huge disclaimer to the front of this podcast, because I'm not looking to freak anybody out. I'm not looking to scare anybody. If you're not a nervous flyer, good for you. Here's all I'll say about this. I, at some point in my adult career, became terrified of flying. And I never flew on an airplane my entire life until the summer before college, when I got on a plane to go to Texas to visit some relatives. That was the first time I ever flew. And I remember that being a very, very positive experience. It was the first time I was out on my own. I took my own money and I went to the travel agent.
Okay.
Who still goes to a travel agent? I went
Nobody.
to a travel agent. I had tickets printed. I was proud of myself. I did the whole airplane thing. I stayed in Texas with some relatives for a few days. And I remember the airplane flight being just a really good experience. I was really excited for it. I wasn't scared back then to do that. And I remember my first takeoff. I'm like, oh man, what is this going to feel like? And I remember being up in the air and, it was a flight from Pennsylvania to Texas, so it was a little bit longer. And, the Pittsburgh airport was still relatively new then. So there was just a lot of excitement and a lot of shiny new things for me to see. And then when I got my first real job out of college, I started to have to travel to Las Vegas a lot. So I spent a lot of time, I was in Vegas probably every other month for a pretty consistent clip. And I also had to fly to New Jersey quite a bit, which means, flying in and out of Newark a lot. And, look, everybody hates airports, everybody hates travel, but for me, I don't mind long lines in airports. I don't mind delayed flights. I don't mind ground stops. That's kind of what you sign up for, I guess. My thing is, I just, at some point, and I think I can remember clearly when it happened, there was a period of time where I was doing work, where I was learning a lot about airplanes and air travel and air safety. And then there was one flight that I took from Columbus to Newark that just put the fear of God into me, if you want to be honest. Like, everything, like, we didn't have one of those situations where, like, masks popped out of the ceiling or we had, like, plummeting. It was just nonstop bumps from the jump. Like, you know, we were in clouds the whole flight. Come to find out, after I got off the flight, a lot of people, and it's one of those things where, like, when, you know, today, like, the flight I was on coming home the other night was bumpy, but no one around me is concerned. Like, you know, the flight attendants are still serving drinks. Like, how bad could it be? But it makes but it makes me uncomfortable, right? This flight, the captain said, "Everybody stay in your seats." I mean, like, he said that out loud. Like, nobody get up. And it was one of those things where it was just constant jostling. It wasn't up and down. It wasn't just side to side. It was like, man, it was just it was just all over the place. And come to find out after the fact, as we were getting off the plane, and, like, you know, everybody was like, "Man, that was really bumpy." And the pilot was like, "Yeah, the plane we were on had an altitude restriction. We couldn't go above like 24,000 feet or something." And I'm like, really? Like, we're gonna get on that plane? And when I heard that, it was during a point in my life where, again, I was reading a lot about airline safety and air travel, and I was like, oh my God, I think I hate flying. And, you know, ever since then, I've dreaded being on airplanes. And don't get me wrong, I like travel. I like going to places. You know, I like going overseas, which you know, requires an airplane in this day and age. I can't take a steamer. You know, it's like I have to get on an airplane to go to these places that I love and to see the people that I love. But I just hate it. I absolutely hate it. And, you know, I am at the point where I take medication to fly. I take Xanax. And my routine goes a little something like this. I had the very fortunate thing to work and still remain good friends with a lot of people who are pharmacists. So they gave me some really good advice here. And the advice that works for me, and I'm not advocating drug abuse on this show, so buckle up.
At least not yet, right?
Yeah, at least not yet, right? So what works for me is I have my Xanax, and what I do is I get to the airport. So I usually Uber to an airport, or I will drive, depending on how long I'm going to be away. I get to the airport, and I go through security. As long as the flight's on time, I usually time my arrival to get to the gate about 45 minutes before boarding. And the reason for that is I will usually find a shop to buy a bottle of water. Just because I will drink some water to, you know, take my medicine and everything. So typically what I'll do is right before boarding, I'll take my first Xanax. And I will put it in my mouth, I will use water, swish it around, and then swallow it. And then from the time that I do that to the time that I actually get on the airplane, I'm starting to get that first kind of hit of, hey, it's going to be okay. Mr. Medicine is in my body, and I'm feeling pretty good, right?
Exactly.
Then I get to my seat, and right as they close the cabin door, I take a second Xanax. But this time I put it under my tongue. Because the thing about Xanax is they're usually pretty small pills that are very, very powdery. And you can accelerate the delivery of it, I'm told, by people who study these things, by placing it under your tongue and letting it dissolve. It tastes nasty, but
I can imagine, yeah.
But the first dose of Xanax kind of gets me through that takeoff, and by the time we hit cruising altitude, I'm feeling pretty good. And if I have the opportunity, depending on what terminal I'm in or what flight I'm on, or I'm sorry, what airline I'm on, and what class of seating I'm in, I will usually chase that with a mimosa. And again, I'm not saying you should do that. Like, do not drink alcohol when you're on Xanax, unless you're me. This is one of those do as I say, not as I do type situations.
Got it.
So between all of that, I can usually suffer through a flight. So that's kind of what works for me. And I know some people are like, don't let it bother you. And I'm, again, like, first of all, don't try to walk a mile in my shoes, or else your feet are going to hurt and you're going to be really tired. It's just that that's what it takes for me to get through a flight. And some people have said to me, you know, Drew, you know, working for Microsoft now, are you worried about your travel and having to fly and everything? And right now, that's not a concern. I'm doing a lot of remote work. I'm doing work for customers that are, mostly within driving distance, a little bit to my detriment, because it's one of those things, and I don't want to get too deep into it because it's work related, but it's one of those things where the closer to the customer, the less I can expense. So it's a little bit to my detriment that I do that, but it makes me pretty happy. But that's all a long way to say that, I'm just not a huge flying person. And I know, Paul, that you have gotten on airplanes willingly quite a bit, especially when you were doing your other jobs, I think.
Yeah, a younger Paul would fly and travel more. But honestly, I've had those flights too, especially on smaller planes. I think my roughest one was from Dallas to Columbus, and it was a little plane, and it just felt like popcorn the entire time. They had the same situation. The pilot was like, "Yeah, I'm going to tell all the flight attendants just to stay seated and stay seat belted, and if you really really need something, hit the light, and we'll send someone over to you. Otherwise, stay seated." But even then, I just kind of got through it. It didn't impact my next flight. I guess I'm lucky the fact that it's just never bothered me.
And it never used to bother me, which is the crazy thing. It's just something that kind of happened one day.
Right.
It wasn't like it was building to that. It was just one day. It was just like, all right, I hate flying now. And it's just weird how that kind of all came on. And it's interesting. You bring up a good point. I mean, because of the way carriers operate these days, everything, especially from Columbus, is all regional jets. You very rarely get big, comfortable jets coming in and out of Columbus unless you're flying Southwest. And, to that effect, when I was going to Vegas a lot, that was back in the day when America West had a hub here in Columbus. And America West, I thought, was a pretty decent airline. It was a low-cost airline, don't get me wrong. It was on par with anything you'd get from Southwest. But they had big planes, and I just remember I never really had a bumpy flight from Vegas to Columbus on any of those jets. But now, typically, I have to connect to get anywhere. Unless you're flying to Detroit, Atlanta, Charlotte. I'm fortunate that there are pretty direct flights to Charlotte, JFK, Newark, and on Southwest you can get to almost any major Southwest city like LA, San Fran, Vegas, Phoenix on a direct. Yeah, it's just we don't live in a great town if you don't like to fly, because everything's a small little jet. So anyway, it was good. I mean, it was a busy week. I was in some required skills training for my job, and it was one of those things where it was definitely a very engaging session. Like, I know that I have been to training at any job that I don't particularly care for. You kind of grit your teeth and get through it. Maybe you can get on your laptop. This was definitely laptops never came out situation, and it was a really, really good training. It was a soft skills type of training on speaking, quite honestly. And, as somebody who speaks a lot, I don't think I'm terrible at it. I know that there's always things I can do to improve my speaking things. And, I got a lot of good pointers and improved on a few things. So it was a pretty good week, just really full. Just got terribly behind on email to the point where I just spent most of my morning today. This is a Friday again. Most of my time this morning just sifting through my inbox and attending meetings. So it wasn't a very productive day today. And plus, I got home kind of late last night. So yeah. What about you? Just a long week. Got stuff going on.
Just one of those weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing special. Nothing out of the ordinary. Just Okay. Very, very busy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a little bit of follow-up before we roll here. A couple things. One, loved the intro to the show last week. Rob, if you're listening, fantastic job. So that was friend of the bestie of the show, Rob Sewell. Rob's based in the UK. Rob's a really good friend of mine. He's been a big fan of ours, big promoter of ours. Rob, buddy, thank you so much for doing that. I thought it was perfect. Man, I could just listen to him read the phone book. He's a great dude, man. So, Rob, Thank you for doing that. Have we got any more intros?
Not since last time. There's one more. This will be a new one this week.
Okay.
But if we don't get some more, we're going to be stuck with those two. Not stuck, but, just have those two. So, send in those intros. Be brave.
Yeah, be brave. We will not make fun of you. We will only thank you. Let's see. So the other piece of follow-up I want to touch on real briefly is, Paul, I think I'm a GWAR fan.
Oh, okay. Tell me how this happened.
All right. So I'll be upfront with you. The only time I ever listened to GWAR prior to our last podcast recording was on a Beavis and Butthead episode.
Oh, yep. Oh, that makes sense.
Okay. All right. They had some GWAR music videos on Beavis and Butthead back in the day. For those of you listening and don't know what Beavis and Butthead is, we'll put some links in the show notes. But if you're old enough to remember Beavis and Butthead, that was back when, MTV played music videos and they would put some in the Beavis and Butthead show. And I remember watching the GWAR videos and I didn't get it. I think I was more focused on kind of the spectacle of what I was seeing versus the music I was listening to. But, when I was putting together the show notes for last week's show, I started actually listening to some GWAR tracks and they're not bad.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not, when you say metal, I tend to think of the large, man on stage, very throatily singing over heavy drums. This definitely has a metal influence to it. And, the songs that you mentioned last show are now on rotation in my Spotify.
Excellent.
I get lots of GWAR videos and like-minded videos in my YouTube algorithm now. And it's not bad. It's not what I was expecting. And I started watching some of the live shows that GWAR has done with some of their more recent costumes, and some of them are pretty good.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got into it, and I listened to quite a bit of GWAR to and from work in Uber rides this week.
Spectacular.
Yeah, so thank you for turning me on to that. And if you can suggest anything else to me that I might like, because typically I would never listen to some of the other stuff. Like I've attempted to listen to Ghost.
Okay.
That is not for me. But I definitely really liked the tracks that we talked about last week.
Okay, superb. I will keep that in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. So those were good. So for this week, I realize we're both a little tired, but I did put something on the docket, and I did give you the high sign ahead of time to prepare. This show this week, we're going to talk about our technical circles. And when I say that, when I had the idea to put this into the show, I wanted it to be about not so much a celebration of because, oh boy, how do I even explain this? It is a celebration of individuals who have helped us and made us better in our careers. But it's also a celebration of people maybe we have helped and people who definitely have not helped us, or people who have definitely, just basically.
Right.
Yeah, just basically people who have helped shape us into the technical professionals that we are. And I want to front load this by saying, listen, this isn't meant to call anybody out specifically. Like I'm not, and I encourage you to do the same, Paul. It's not to say if there's definitely a style of person that chafes, let's not call anybody out in that respect. And to that effect, I definitely have a list of people that I consider to be top tier. These people have made me better, and I do want to call those people out. But it is not an exhaustive list. And listen, if you're listening out there, and, you're like, oh, boy, here's Drew. Drew's going to give me some kudos. And I don't give you kudos. Trust me, man. That is not – I'm not leaving you out on purpose. I truly am not. And I could make a list of 200-some people that I consider that have made me better in different ways. But, for brevity's sake, I can't hit that list in an hour, right? So I want to keep it high level. There are definitely some what I consider to be high points in my career and some low points in my career, to be fair, that I definitely want to call out and use by way of example. And the goal here is that if you're sitting there and you're wondering where those people are in your life, maybe it's time to start seeking out new mentors, new opportunities, new networks to grow. So that was kind of my thought in putting this together. So Paul, did you put some thought into this week?
I did. I put some thought. I have some notes.
Okay.
So kind of curious to see where this goes. Yeah.
I feel like this is going to be a little bit rambly of a topic, especially for me. Like I don't want this to be just like a top 10 list like we did with the subreddits last week, which, by the way, oh boy, that was so much fun. It
was fun. Yeah.
We have to revisit that. And I don't want it to be like that. Like, and again, this is definitely in no particular order either. So please just bear with us here. If you're expecting your name to be called out here and it isn't, you have the right to be mad. I get it. But trust me, there are people that I wish I had enough time in a podcast to, specifically thank and, call out that, yeah, you're an awesome person. But this list I've cultivated, and I did have to cultivate it a little bit. Like, I definitely had, some cutoffs here about some of that stuff. But just bear with us as we kind of get through this. So the topic is, our technical circles. Now, Paul and I consider us both to be really, really highly technical people. We're definitely
I used to be, so
no, Paul. Okay, so let's get this out of the way, right? Is Paul? You are a manager now.
I am, yes.
Right. It is a step in your career that on your career path that you are on. But Paul, listen, there's no doubt in my mind that if you had to jump into an issue, you know what you're doing.
Most times, yes.
Okay. So, folks,
Yes,
Paul's being
but I
very
was
modest.
extremely technical for most of my career. Yeah.
Yeah. And even though your day-to-day responsibilities may have changed, I still think that you're a highly technical person. And I would also say that your technical skills have helped elevate you to the position that you are in now, where you can help mentor other people. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So we'll agree on that. So the topic is kind of our technical circles, right? Like, who are the people, or who are the people that have helped kind of shape us as technical professionals, or people who have looked out for us or given us good advice or given us bad advice and helped us get to kind of where we're at in our careers today. Because, it doesn't really matter what Paul and I are both doing. I'm going to call us both pretty successful. And, even though our success, we owe a lot to that to other people, I'm not here to say that this is a blueprint for how you get from point A to point B. It's just, I wanted to bring this topic up just because I think it is important to have people in your circle that always challenge you, always push you, and also when to realize when people maybe shouldn't be in your technical circle or your friend circle or whatever you want to call it. So let's dive right into this, Paul. So, I kind of want to start, chronologically with this. So I went back pretty far, and I thought about kind of the first person that kind of pushed me and kind of helped me see my potential a little bit, gave me an opportunity to spread my wings and kind of make a name for myself. And he is probably the person I consider to be one of the best bosses I ever had, insofar that he really pushed me and taught me a lot about kind of how corporate life works, and also gave me some pretty good life lessons along the way. He was a guy that was right there with me right before I proposed to my wife. He was a guy that I could call any time of the day and the night and ask for advice on a million different things. And he was a guy that I lost way too early in my career. So this guy's name was Roger, and he was my second manager at my first job. And I know my first manager probably isn't listening, and it's nothing against him, because that person gave me a shot, let me get my foot in the door. But I consider my second boss, Roger, that really helped me grow. He was the person that taught me how to expense things and how to, navigate tricky political situations. And he helped elevate me. He helped get me visibility. He helped me find my own voice in meetings and how to own projects and how to help people and how to interact with people who were not only users but big stakeholders in projects and things that I work on. And I still think about a lot of the advice and things that he gave me. And he also had a really interesting personal story. He had a million stories. This guy did a million different things before he was in a position that he was in at the job that we were at. And one of the first jobs that he had, kind of before he settled down, was he was a casino manager on a cruise ship. And
wow.
And when we would go to Vegas, he would never gamble, which, if you think about it, kind of makes sense. But he would watch me gamble, And that's a perfect metaphor for our kind of relationship, because he would watch me screw up. He would watch me do things that he knew weren't going to end great for me. But he would never step in. He would let me fail. And when it was over, he had a really good kind of almost fatherly way of giving you good advice about how you could improve. And that had helped me tremendously, especially in those early kind of formative years as I was just kind of carving out a path in IT and a path in a very large company at the time. And it really helped elevate me and get me to a pretty good place at the time. And he's not with us anymore. He passed away from lung cancer quite a few years ago now. And I still think about him a lot sometimes. When I'm going through particular high points in my life or particular low points, there are times where I still wish I could reach out to him for advice, because he knew how to separate the work from the personal. And when he would talk to me about things and give me advice, you could definitely tell if it was coming from more of a personal or professional place. And I haven't really met anybody else, especially somebody who has been a mentor or a leader to me, that I think has been able to do that. And that was really special to me. And I know that in my interactions with people, I tend to use that a lot too, because when people would ask me for advice or people would ask me for things, a lot of times I'll have to wear a different hat. And depending on the message I'm trying to convey is the hat that I will have on. And much like Roger, you can tell what hat I'm wearing by how much I'm swearing. So if I'm swearing a lot, if I'm swearing a lot, that's friend Drew giving you advice. And if I'm giving you more straightforward, what seems to be good advice, that's probably Robo Drew. But
bleep bloop.
But yeah, bleep bloop. A little inside humor there. But typically that's where that comes from. And there's still not a lot of days that don't go by that I think about him. And I miss him dearly. He did a lot for me. He stuck his neck out a few times. He rescued me a few times. He definitely helped me navigate some very tricky technical and professional and personal situations. And I know not everybody gets that, and I consider myself fortunate that I did. So he's kind of the first person I want to mention. So Paul, kind of keeping with that, maybe we do this in a kind of a chronological fashion. I mean, what do you think? Who do you got?
So, I mean, obviously we had different careers, right? So I really didn't have anybody special for me until like 3 or 4 years, probably about 3 years into my technical career. My first couple of jobs were, my first one was really kind of short. Just like I was just happy to be working and doing anything in the application development space at all. My job after that was outside of, being in Texas for a while and getting laid off, wasn't that interesting. It wasn't until I started I worked for my third job. I worked for a big major consulting company. Like they wouldn't even talk to you if you weren't a Fortune 500 company. It's just that's the level of businesses that they worked with. And I think, and this is the story I tell quite a bit, and I think I even mentioned it kind of briefly in this podcast as well. But when I started that job, I was a software developer. I just wanted to come in and, get my tickets and get my specs and just, write the code. And I really enjoyed writing the code. I put a lot of effort into being really good at that and making the right decisions and just excelling at the raw, the super technical stuff, the day-to-day, writing code. And then I had a couple of people through at the consulting company. One was the first one really was my career manager. We didn't really have bosses, right? Because it was a weird company like that. You just basically had somebody who was responsible for making sure you're getting all your training done and making sure that you weren't, embarrassing yourself with the client and, just making sure your career was moving forward. His name was Scott. And he kind of really saw something in me. And I remember the conversation very clearly. And the big gist of it was he's like, Paul, you're really good at development, but your social skills suck. And if you really want to progress in this field, that's what you need to focus on, because as much as you like working with computers, you're really working with people to solve problems. And if you don't focus on that and make that really a big focus, your career's it's only going to go so far. And, he helped me he gave me, pointing me in the direction, some training stuff. He was the first one that, because, I was young and I was full of anxiety, especially around people, which is probably why I focus on the development side so much. And he's like, you just need to like jump in the deep end and start talking in front of people. Like, so he was the one that really got me to start doing technical presentations at user groups and conferences, and kind of got me through that, busting through that anxiety. And, that really, I mean, that's something that I still remember to this day. And, I've had the opportunity we're going to rambling. I've had some opportunities in my career to like give advice to people in the beginning of their career and be a mentor. And that's the one I always come back to. It's like, it doesn't matter how, especially in a business environment, like, yeah, it does matter how good you are technically, but if you can't communicate that to other people, like, what's the point,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's a pretty big theme, right? Is, I've also worked with people, that are really, really good, technically. And, I've worked with people who aren't good communicators or just non-communicators, people who just don't follow up or don't, or maybe, well, that's a harsh take. Maybe that's not the right way to say it, but maybe not follow up enough. Like I'm of the mind that I would always rather over communicate than under communicate. And, you talk about work styles that necessarily maybe make me chafe. It's when people tend to under communicate in any capacity, whether it's information that I'm waiting on, or if it's information that maybe I've given out that isn't like even acknowledged, right? Just not even kind of acknowledging like, yeah, okay, I got it. Or yeah, that worked or that didn't work. I hate when people leave me hanging. So,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah, it sounds like we both kind of had people looking out for us and helping us, early and kind of shaping us in things, which I think is important. Yeah. And if you're listening and you don't have that, I would say there's probably one of two things going on there. Maybe you work for a smaller company, or maybe you work for a really big company and you don't feel you have a close connection with, your immediate boss or whatnot. But I would definitely encourage you to seek that person out, even if they're not in your team, your department, your group, or even your company. I think everybody needs that one person who isn't afraid to basically tell somebody, like, hey, you could be doing better. And you need to be open to that feedback too. Because I think it's easy, especially as you get on in your career a little bit, to think that you can do no wrong, that you can think that there's nothing you can improve on, and everybody always has stuff you can improve on. There's always going to be somebody better. There's always going to be somebody better technically, and there's always going to be somebody, more polite, more astute, more refined, more savvy. And, you can seek those people out. Just like you would seek out training for a technical skill, you can definitely seek out training and advice for career development, professional development, and that type of thing. And, I'm not saying I'm the best person to give you that advice, but I just know that there are avenues available there. So don't be afraid to kind of seek those out. So, moving on for a second, there have definitely been people too that I have leaned on technically to teach me complex things that I don't know that I would have ever gotten. And when I say gotten, I mean really understood, unless I had these people in my life. So, I've kind of got two on this list. And the first one is, I don't know if he's officially a friend of the show or not, but I can't have this discussion without mentioning John Kruger.
John Kruger.
John effing Kruger. If you don't know who John Kruger is, highly, highly recommend that you seek him out on Twitter, you seek him out online, or you seek him out on LinkedIn, because John is just such a sharp guy. And, John, much like you, Paul, has gone kind of gone through a career renaissance recently.
Yeah.
Where, he has sort of changed roles. When I met John, he was doing, development work, darn good development work. And he was like the first developer that I ever really got to know at my previous job and work with. And, he helped me understand kind of how things worked, in the IT department where we were. And, I really enjoyed working with him. I felt that he taught me just as much as I taught him. Like, he actually taught me things like, test-driven development. How does that work? Why do we do that? He actually showed me a few things on the SQL side of things that I wasn't as sharp on. And he wasn't afraid to push some boundaries. He wasn't afraid to see how far I could go. It was always a pleasure working with him. He was always thankful and supportive of the advice and help that I gave him, and vice versa. And John's the kind of guy, now he when he left, that was really hard for me because I just liked working with him so much. I always felt like there was always more that I could learn from him. And when he moved on, he got a chance to lead a team and still be a little bit technical, but lead a team, and that helped him kind of take the next step in his career. And then up until recently now, he has also kind of dipped his toes in the big data / data science water. So, John's the kind of guy that I feel you can put any sort of challenge in front of him, and he's just going to crush it. But John taught me kind of how ORMs work, right? I just never really had a good grasp on any of that before I met John. Like I look back on people that I consider to be technical masters of their domain, and I definitely feel like John is that guy. And, John is also the person who pushed me into speaking. He's the one that really encouraged me to get out in the community and share some of the knowledge I have and network and grow like that. And, John was such a tremendous influence on me. And, he and I stay in touch regularly. We'll get lunch every once in a while. We chat on Twitter. He maintains a fantastic blog that we'll put a link to in there that has good technical topics, but really deep, like thoughtful blog posts about stuff. And John's been around, and John is
exceptional writer, just exceptional.
He is a very good writer. He's a good guy to know. If you're looking for a strong technical person, if you're ever at a conference and you see John Kruger on the topic list, even if you're not necessarily interested in the topic that he might be talking about, I cannot recommend him enough. If you're a Columbus-based listener of this podcast, or you're going to be coming through here to a conference and John's there, seek him out. Just say hi. Get to know him. He's so super good. So super good.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I had the pleasure of also working with John Kruger for a while, and actually working on the same team as John on the same project for about 6 months. And it was special. He's a phenomenal person. I kind of like to joke that he's better than me in every way possible. He's smarter. He's has a better communicator. He's better looking. He's more in shape.
All right.
He's probably a better parent.
Shirt idea for the podcast.
Yeah.
Black tee, white letters. The best version of me is John Kruger.
But like, and he is like, he's so good, but there is not an ounce of ego or pride in that man.
No, and that's key. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wanted to mention that too. He is not an arrogant dude.
No,
he's not.
He's like, I figured this out, whether it's how to communicate or this particular problem, and all he wants to do after figuring it out is teach you.
Yep.
And not tell you, teach you.
Yeah. And that's kind of a lost art, right? Because I feel like today there are so many people that just want to flex on each other and prove that they're the smartest person in the room. Right. Listen, I have news for you. If you were ever in a conference room with John Kruger, you were not the smartest person in the room. But John would never make you feel like he was. But at the same time, if John was passionate about something, he definitely had a way of conveying his thoughts and his ideas on it. And not in a disrespectful way, right? He could get his point across and he could stick to his guns, but never once did I ever feel that John was a jerk.
No, never.
And I hope one day I get to keep working with John. John was a really big technical influence on me. So I don't know, Paul, who you got?
When I think about the person that helped me the most technically, it was the same company, the same consulting company, but a different project. We were building just a massive, high volume web application for processing mortgages at the time. So like a scale, a company scale that I had never seen before. And his name was Tom. He was, his title was an architect, but he kind of instilled upon me my like hatred for like ivory tower architects, and really taught me what a good software architect was. And, even now, like that, the technologies we use, on a day-to-day basis have changed. It's still the stuff he taught me about, how to build scalable, maintainable systems. Like I still refer to that stuff, almost daily. He really took my technical skills from like being a software developer to being someone who could design systems and be aware of the bigger problems and how to evaluate technologies and frameworks and consider everything from like, is it easy to maintain? Is it supported? Is it easy to use? Will the developers like it? How is it going to scale? When is it going to break? And all those things, all those little things you have to keep in your brain when you're helping design like big enterprise systems that support, hundreds of users at a given time. He really helped. And the thing is about Tom is he didn't have to do this. That was his job, and my job was just, to run a dev team and get tickets done. But he really went out of his way to, pull me into those conversations. And while he was still the one making all the decisions, making sure that making sure that I understood why he made those decisions and explaining the thought process to me. And, I said, really kind of allowed me to take that next step technically and have the confidence to go into a place and I've done this before. You need something that, can scale out to, the 100th degree. I've been there. I know how to do that. And even though I think we worked together in 2006, so 13 years ago, what he taught me, I still remember, and I still refer back to this day.
So let's go down that rabbit hole for a minute. So can you think of one pattern or technology or thing that you learned that you think has the biggest benefit to your career? Because I definitely have one. I don't know if there's one particular thing that you think was the biggest booster to your career.
Oh, geez. You go first. Let me think about it.
Okay, so for me, it was learning PowerShell.
Okay, yeah.
Because so I tell this story when I present on PowerShell. When I walked in the door at my last job, you were one of the first people that interviewed me. I don't know if you remember that.
I do, yes.
Yeah, so when I went through the interview process at my last company, I sat with members of the team that I was going to be joining for an interview. And I also got to meet you and Gene and Andrew, which last names here aren't important, but I got to meet all of you throughout that interview process. And what was interesting is that was the first chance that I had to talk to kind of customers / developers, because the team that I met with first was more infrastructure based. And, those were the people who were responsible for the network and, Active Directory and things that were kind of critical, and storage and stuff like that were kind of critical to being a DBA, because I was a DBA in my last role. But then I met with you and Gene and Andrew, and you and Gene were coming from the DevOps side of the house, which I had absolutely no experience working with. And then Andrew from the development side. And quick side note, I think John Kruger was also supposed to be in our interview, but I don't think he was able to make it. And to this day, I wonder if I would have got hired if John was in the room. But that's a whole nother thing. But anyway, I remember pretty clearly the first time I walked into our last company, and we, people were like, okay, well, we need to push this hotfix to production. And I was fully expecting just to get an email with some scripts attached to it to deploy. But no, we had a process to deploy code, right? We had DevOps, we had stuff, and it all ran on PowerShell. And prior to coming to that job, I just thought that PowerShell was a blue DOS prompt. Like, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I didn't know that much about it. I had always wanted to learn it. I remember when it first started showing up on servers and computers that I administered at my previous job, but I had never really used it before. And it became a mad scramble for me to get proficient at it. And ever since then, that has been the technology that has always set me apart, that level of automation. And, now we're seeing PowerShell as a great vehicle to, do things in like, Azure, or, you do things, anything DevOps really, anything where you have to move units of work around. PowerShell is usually underpinning all of that. And, that technology has really set me up for success. And, I'm not going to discount the fact that, learning SQL Server internals and learning how to performance tune and learning T-SQL, even learning JavaScript or ASP or any of those other things aren't important, because that was a big part of my career too, and still is. But these days, it's all more and more PowerShell for me.
Yeah. I mean, even though, I'm a manager, I still use PowerShell almost daily in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, in fact, I've recently gone through the process of hiring a couple of people for my team. One is far more experienced than the other, but when they both started, one of the first things I literally did was like, okay, like, you're going to spend a week, and all I want you to do is just find the PowerShell tutorial on the internet that speaks to you and do it. And that's what they did. And I think especially one of them was like, okay, this is a little weird. Like, I'm not actually doing something. I just sat down and he just like, teach yourself PowerShell. But now that he's actually starting to do more work, he's like, okay, yeah, like, I get it. Like, there is, especially where, like, in the operation side, where it's all about, automation and pulling things together and, dealing with a fleet of servers, right? Like, you don't have time to do things manually anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You don't. It's scripted or, get out.
Yeah, and I would argue that it doesn't really matter what piece of technology you're working on. If you're a web developer and you need to deploy code, probably going to use some PowerShell somewhere. If you're a DBA, right, there's ways to administer your servers with PowerShell, SharePoint, Active Directory, Azure. Like, I mean, AWS, like, screw it. Like, if you're not a Microsoft person, right, like, AWS still has PowerShell modules. VMware has PowerShell modules. Like, there's so many things that underpin all that. And that kind of common fabric of stitching everything together and understanding how to write good, effective code in PowerShell, like I said, it's really set me apart. But enough about me. Like, do you, like, now that I've kind of gone through my spiel, do you kind of get do you have an idea?
Yeah. So it's a little different than yours, but it's in the same vein. And I can't remember who it was, but I remember. So, like, I kind of cut my teeth on the Microsoft stack, doing ASP.NET, doing C#, web development, things like that. And I was getting a little burnout. You just, doing the same thing over and over again. And I wish I remember who the one that told me. And he's like, okay, you know what you need to do, Paul? You need to sit down and learn a new language. And he recommended for me Ruby. So I went away and I bought a book and I went through it. And even though I've, outside of a few minor things, I've never really used Ruby professionally. I think what he was like really trying to get to me, and what hit me was, it's good, and it's learning something new, even if you don't actually ever use it, kind of teaches you new ways of thinking and new ways of approaching problems. and that you can take those lessons and apply them to the things you do on a regular basis. And that's kind of an epiphany that hit me, was, you know, seeing how different Ruby was compared to C#, and realizing that anything I learn has value, whether or not I'm going to use it today or tomorrow or ever. Just being willing to learn and embrace new ideas.
Yeah, Ruby's a pretty good one. It's not a language that I have a lot of experience with, but it definitely still has, you know, a pretty fair usage thing, especially in like automation and like QA and test automation circles. I see a lot of people writing Ruby for stuff. That's a good one. Yeah. Before I move on, though, there is one other person that I think had taught me something kind of critical, and I want to lump it in here just because I think it's something that had totally opened my eyes to kind of modern IT. And, you know, it's funny that, you know, ever since coming to Microsoft, you know, I work in the data and AI space, and I definitely still help people with SQL Server. But I definitely spend most of my days these days kind of writing PowerShell, and it's mostly PowerShell in support of DevOps processes. And, you know, I was fortunate, you know, when I worked with you and Gene and Nick, and there was a few other people along the way too. But I would say that, you know, you three definitely taught me kind of how DevOps should work. And no, I'm serious, man. Yeah. I tell you what, I how do I say this without sounding like a complete jerk? The fact that I know what Azure DevOps is has already set me apart in my new role.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? How to use Git, how repositories work, how branching and merging works, right? Like just that whole soup to nuts, you know, software life cycle management to, you know, building pipelines and releases and doing that level of automation in support of things like whether they be databases or applications or servers or whatnot. Like the things that you three sort of taught me have really also helped elevate me. And I know that DevOps is one of those buzzwords like containers and Kubernetes or whatever that everybody's super hyped about and always means something else to somebody.
Right.
But what you guys taught me about that entire process, and you know, you were a really big part of that. So I need to call you out specifically. But friend of the show, bestie of the show, Nick Dunn, also taught me a lot, right? Because that guy, whew, boy, is he a genius. So I would say learning kind of modern, you know, developer operations, IT operations like that was also a huge differentiator for me. Like I'm really glad that I got that exposure because I know a lot of DBAs and I know a lot of people, even developers at companies today that maybe at best they're checking things into source control, but deployments are not nearly as elegant or automated, and there's not you know, branches or releases or, you know, all that automation. Like that was a really positive experience for me.
Well, thank you, Drew.
Oh, of course.
Tears.
Yeah. No, it was good. It was good. Anything else on that before I move on to the next one?
No, I think we can move on.
Okay. One more topic here. You know, Paul, who do you have in your circle today of people who really push you?
Oh, geez.
And I say push in a good, right? Like people that are nudging you to continue to improve. Like who's really giving you that continuous improvement kind of vibe?
Well, you know, it's different for me right now because for the last 7 months, I've had less of a technical role and more of, you know, a leadership, a people leader, a management kind of role. So, I mean, if I was talking, you know, if I was going to sit back and talk about technical stuff, right, like I'd come back to, you know, friend of the show, Nick Dunn as well. Like he's just so smart and learns things so fast and is so on top of things and so willing to try new ideas. But, you know, honestly, on the management side, I just hit my mic. That was probably really loud. I'm still, you know, like I have my peers and I have, you know, my manager. But I'm still just trying to find my way personally before, like, I don't have that person right now, to be honest. I mean, I have people that are helping me, but, you know, I don't think I found that person to help me in this phase of my career that like I found before when I was more technical. So I think, I'm still learning, and I'm still finding my way, and I'm still, I guess looking for that person. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of going to be my answer too. But before I give you mine, what if I said that this person doesn't necessarily need to be somebody in your work circle?
Okay.
Like, do you have somebody maybe like a close friend or a relative or somebody that pushes you to be better?
Like, as far as the drive to be better, like, I'm very internally driven for that aspect. I always have been. I've always liked learning new things and getting better. But I'm not sure I have that person right now in my life.
Well,
outside of talking to you, Drew.
Oh, well, good save. Here's the thing I would say is I think that we all, right, if you're a highly motivated person working in any field, you're always going to be internally motivated, right? It's usually not about the money. It's usually not about the prestige. It's the thrill of the work and the feeling of doing good work that I think drives a lot of us. So I think everybody has to have that a little bit to be successful in whatever you're doing, right? But
right.
for me, where I was going with this is, as someone who is still relatively new in role, in my new job, in my new career, my new company, I have a mentor in the group that helps me navigate the day-to-day stuff. And I have mentors. I actually have more than one. I have other people who look out for me and help me figure out how to navigate, kind of career development in my new role. But having said all that, what I don't have, I don't have yet, okay, to be fair, because much like you, being so new into what I'm doing right now, it's a little early, I think, for me to have that person who is helping me plan my next step.
Yeah. Like, you don't know what you need yet.
You're right. You don't know what you need. Now, having said that, and that's a perfect segue, is I have people in my life that will push me in other ways that I think are important. And, I can't not have this discussion without talking about kind of how I got involved in CrossFit and the gym that I go to.
Okay.
Because I have two really good coaches in my life that have helped me develop physically. They help me get better. They help me, be a better human, more in shape, I guess, right? Like there is that part of it. That's why I pay the fee to go there. But what's interesting is in getting to know them over the years, they have helped open my eyes to a lot of different things. Because one thing about me is if something doesn't come naturally to me, I struggle internally. Like, let me give you an example. So I have been doing CrossFit now it'll be 6 years here, probably in the next few months. And in that time, I have accomplished a lot of things. There are things I can do physically that I have never been able to do my whole life. And this is coming from a guy that, played a little bit of hockey. And I think the only other like physical sport I ever played was some tennis in high school and maybe some intramural soccer in college. Like, that's been about it. So I'm not a guy who grew up working out or doing a lot of physical activity. I had planted myself in front of video game consoles and computers for my entire life. So, getting into this in my mid-30s has been a challenge. And, when I first started CrossFit, there were things that I liked to do, but there were a lot of things that I didn't like to do. And to this day, there are still certain movements that I just cannot do. And those days where I know I have to do those movements, I sulk. Like, it comes out of me. Like, the coaches know I don't want to be there. But here's the thing. They won't let me quit. They know that it's a challenge for me, and they give me the pointers and everything. And they'll give me those pointers, and they'll nudge me in that direction. But ultimately, I'm the one that has to own getting better at that skill. Like, for instance, like snatching weight off the ground. I have tried to snatch weight off the floor for 5 years. And whether it's a mobility thing or a strength thing, I just can't do it. And, they see me struggle. They see me check out mentally when they know that I'm just not having it. But they never give up on me. And, getting to know Coach Jeff and Coach Jenny, and Coach Jenny, especially because of the gymnastics things that I do, has helped me realize that, you have to work hard. Nothing is ever always going to come naturally. Like, there is an element of work that you have to put into things, and you have to be in the right headspace to accept A, that you're not good at something, and B, the only way you're going to get better is to realize that you need to get better. And we have a motto in Gymnastics Club that it's not okay to do bad. And that may seem a little bit harsh, right? But that personal accountability of, you want to get better at this, you have to own it. I can coach you and I can give you all those pointers, and I can tell you what you need to do, and I could give you those cues and those pointers, but ultimately it's your body and the way you move it is up to you. Like, you have to own that. That sense of accountability of myself has helped me in a lot of different ways that are kind of hard to verbalize, but, being a member of that, I think, first of all, joking aside, right? Like, you could say that joining a CrossFit gym is like joining a cult, and, I can kind of see where you're coming from there, but man, I got to tell you, like, the gym I belong to is really something special, and it's a big part of my life now, and I really appreciate all the people there and how they help me and help me grow, and, to be honest, when I was contemplating career moves, I talked it over with them too. I wanted their opinion because they got to know me over the years. They know who I am as a person and what I want and what I'm looking for. And, I leaned on them pretty heavily when I had a lot of consternation and a lot of deliberation and a lot of fear about moving on. And, having a coach like that and having people that you can bounce those ideas off, especially if they're not in your kind of immediate professional circle, is huge. So I'm going to be kind of forever in their debt in that regard. And, having those people that really push me to see things that I don't see and help me accept things that I don't want to accept, that's really big for me.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? So I'm going to kind of play off that for a little bit. And, right. Like, sometimes, like, you have bad days at work or things are challenging. And, so I guess, all right, so I'm going to take a step back here. My son, Zachary, who's, 13, has had, and maybe this is the podcast topic for a later time. He has had a history of, health issues, ranging all the way from organ failure to cancer. And, he's 13 now, perfectly healthy. Everything's fine. But just having, like, gone through that, and not only watching him and how strong he's been and how he's gotten through it, but, like, watching how strong my wife was and how, nurturing she was. And, like, she's a school teacher, like your wife. And, watching her, especially in this most recent stuff when he was battling lymphoma, and he missed a lot of school, and watching her, like, go through her day at school and then come home and really kind of homeschool Zachary so he could, like, maintain his grades and not come by a year, has really just kind of given me a perspective of, like, yes, sometimes things are hard, but if you keep pushing at them and don't give up and you just work, like, you will get through it. It will get better. You will improve. You will get to the other side. And then realizing that, like, yeah, like, if I have a crappy day at work or something's not working, like, in the scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal.
Yep.
And to have,
couldn't agree more.
Having that perspective is really changed who I am.
And to kind of elaborate on that, Paul, you knowing you the way that I know you, I've seen you go through those bouts where it wasn't readily apparent to me that I knew that your son was having some of the problems that he had until you shared it, and then it all kind of made sense. And man, I got to tell you, with everything you've had to go through there, I give you all the credit in the world, dude, because you keep it together. You really do. Yeah. That is one thing I really, really admire about you personally, is that you can keep your crap together. I almost said a swear. You keep your stuff tight. And I tend to let things fester and bother me, and you can tell when I'm having a bad day. But to your point, like even my worst days, man, I'm still pretty blessed. Like I got privilege in ways a lot of people don't. I know that now, right? And that has been something that, in joining my new company, that they really tell you to check. It's something that I never really realized, and I've had some other strong people in my circles that have helped me understand what it means to not be straight white middle-aged white guy. right? Like people have helped me with that too. And man, like I give you all the credit in the world for that. I really do.
Well, thanks.
Yeah,
it's one of those situations where like I talk to a lot of other people and a lot of parents, and like and they're like, I can't imagine like going through that. How did you find the strength? And like honestly, especially when it's a kid, like you just figure it out. You don't have a choice. Like you have to hold it together because they can't, right? Mm-hmm. And you just find like I think everybody has that strength if it comes down to it. But like a big part of it was just kind of realizing the perspective, like what's important and what's not, and just like and having hope. Like I think that's a big part of it too, is just realizing that, like I said, like things may be crappy today, but there's always something you can do to make that better. And then if you just do it, well, spoiler alert, things will get better.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because sometimes it is easy to lose hope, and it is really easy to kind of fall into that despondency trap, right? Like it's easy to get there, but it's, I don't know, like as somebody who has been in that pit a few times, the pit of despondency, let's call it. Somebody who's been there more than a few times, like it does take a lot of effort to claw back out of it, versus realizing you're about to fall into that pit and just kind of sidestepping it, right? Like ducking a punch, so to speak. Yeah. I mean that's a pretty good list. The only other thing I want to touch on before we go, right, is I think we can't have that discussion and not talk about things that definitely we don't gravitate to, or things or people or traits in people that we find challenging, or if we could, it's hard to say if there's things we would see in people that we wish that they could change, but that's not on us, right? Like we can't tell people how to live or how to be. But like, are there definite personality traits, Paul, that that maybe you don't, or definite styles or whatever of management or work that you just don't gel with?
Yes. It's one thing, but there's like two aspects of it, and both of them annoy me equally for slightly different reasons. So I've been doing this a long time. I've been in operations for a while. Things are going to break. Things are going to go sideways. Crap's going to hit the fan. You're going to have outages. You're going to have problems. And what really kind of what irks me is, the first thing is the person who, when something is broken, is looking for the person to blame instead of focusing on the problem and getting through the solution. That's always just kind of irked me. It's like, well, like, let's focus on the problem. Let's make things better. Let's solve it. I don't need to point fingers at anybody. And then kind of the flip side of that is like, people, like every single person in IT has made a mistake or shipped a bug or caused an outage. Like, if it hasn't happened yet, it will happen. Just wait. Mm-hmm. And the people that want to deflect the blame and not take ownership of it, like, I've always been the guy that, like, if I caused the problem, let me be the first person in line to fix it. Like, that's just how I've always carried myself. And that when I don't see that same kind of quality, that someone who's just like, well, like, so-and-so told me to do this, or, he wrote the documentation and it was wrong, or, I don't have time for that. I don't think that's the right attitude to have. But like about anything. Like it's not about whose fault it is. It's about getting better.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. I don't like when people try to duck a little bit of responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, to your point, like, you know, if something does break, I will jump in and I will definitely fix it. Like I will get into fix it mode.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I will absolutely make no bones about the fact that one of two things. Like if I did it, I'll be the first person to raise my hand and said, "Yep, that was me." Like
Yep.
I messed up, right? But at the same time, like if other people aren't going to step up, and there's a couple different ways to look at this, is that I will definitely make known, like, hey, you messed this up, like, just so you know. And I don't do it to be mean, right? But at the same time, like, there are people who just won't accept that what they did was bad, or that, okay, well, it happened. But
Right.
you know, if you're not going to learn from it, if you're not going to take it as an opportunity to maybe change your process, change your attitude, change your workflow, like, it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
And it's that repeated failure that I cannot abide. I cannot. Like, that drives me up a wall. Because I mean, I think it's okay to make a mistake. I do. But making the same mistake over and over, or not changing up, that's really hard to swallow. It really is for me. It always will be. That will always be a struggle for me, is to not say we need to do better.
Yeah.
And the other thing is when people can't take feedback, right? Like, not all feedback has to be positive, by the way. Like, it's okay to give a peer feedback, in my opinion, that may not be positive. Like, you should be able to tell somebody, hey, listen, that thing, like, we should do better at this, right? And it may not even be I might even have a solution. If I just know that there's an opportunity to improve, that should be an open discussion. It should be okay to have that discussion. But some people get so in their own heads about, well, I don't want to look bad, or I don't want people to know that I didn't know this. Like, it's okay. It's okay to not know something. It is.
There's a lot of things in the world to know. You're not going to know everything. Like,
it's okay. It's okay to not know. Because guess what? If you say you don't know, that's an excuse to go learn it. Or
exactly.
if you didn't know that you're not supposed to, like, deploy this thing at this time of day, guess what? Now you know not to do it. Like,
Yep.
Like, own it, right? Like, just own your mistakes. And when people don't want to do that, or want to try to sweep things under the rug, I just absolutely hate that. I hate it so much. Yeah. The only other negative thing that I've ever really had is I had a direct supervisor call me stupid once.
Oof. Ouch.
Yeah. I got out from underneath that boss real quick. Real quick.
Wow.
Yeah. That could be a whole separate topic.
Yeah.
Man, that went a lot of places.
It did. It was very rambling, like you thought, but
It was a little rambly, but it's us, right? And it's hard. It's hard to put that in an outline. And you know, I have a whole, like, bare page full of notes of other people that I could put on here, right? Like, there is so many people that have helped me. I mean, really, and so many people that have helped me by being terrible too, by telling me what not to do, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I think we all have that group of people. So my kind of closing thought on this is that everybody needs that personal circle. And all I would say is that in my experience, right? And I'm not trying to overly classify this or belabor this point, is for me, I have found that you will kind of naturally gravitate towards the people that you know are going to make you better. And my advice to you is, if you're out there listening and you don't feel like anybody you're gravitating to can help you be that, I would encourage you to start expanding your network, because you will find people that will challenge the way you think, that will challenge you to be better, that can help you grow either technically or socially or professionally. Like, there are a lot of different ways to grow. And I'm not saying pay $500 and go to a Tony Robbins summit at the airport Marriott. Like, I'm not saying do that. There are ways to get around that. I mean, hell, if you think that I'm the person to give you advice, I would never tell you no. I might tell you that I'm busy and I need a little time and we can schedule that, but I would love the opportunity to help people. And, one of the things I love about speaking in technical communities is I love when someone just tells me, hey, what you told me was awesome. Thank you. That hits a lot of pleasure centers for me.
Yeah, and maybe that's something that everyone who's listening to this should take away with them is, like, if you have somebody in your life who's making a difference, like, make sure tomorrow just to tell them thank you.
Yeah, that's a big one too. Saying, just you don't need to belabor it. You don't need to get them a card or flowers or donuts or whatever. Just go up and say, hey man, I appreciate you.
Yeah,
yeah, that's a big one. That's a really big one.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's just getting that one thanks, or that real heartfelt thanks is like, hey, like you improved my life in a way, or you taught me something. Like, man, that can carry you for a long time.
Yeah. Man, that was quite a topic.
Woo.
Yeah. All right. Well, why don't we cap it there, Paul? Tell everybody where they can find us and where they should send their intros. Send in your gosh darn intros, please. Yes. I'm begging you.
It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be high quality. It doesn't have to be, as you can tell from the last intro, it does not have to be noise free. Just bust out voice recorder, voice memos, whatever it's called on Android phones that records your voice. Just say something and then email that file to contact@doingtheirbest.com. That's the email address for the podcast. And we'll make sure that it gets into the next, we'll make sure it gets into a show in the future.
Yes, we will definitely give you a shot at being our intro person. We will do that. And even if you're super late to this, I don't care if you get to this episode and it's been a year since we've been doing this. We would love to get an intro.
Just send it. Yep.
You know what you should do, Paul? You should shove a microphone in people's face at work.
Record an intro now. Go.
Yeah, do it. Yeah. So, Paul, where can people find you on the interwebs?
I'm on Twitter @PaulBaylor. That's BAHLER. And where can people find you, Drew?
I'm on Twitter @Pitferg. That is PITTFURG. I tweeted pictures of cute dogs that I saw in airports this week.
You sure did.
I sure did. That was Gizmo, by the way. Gizmo had a beautiful, beautiful little smile. One other thing before we go, we've definitely got podcast topics. I'm definitely going to throw some more on the dock before our next episode. But if you've got ideas or you have things that you want our insight or advice or you just hear us talk about, don't be afraid to send that in as well. We love to get your feedback.
Absolutely.
Yep. With that, we'll go ahead and call this a show. We'll see you all next time.
Goodbye.